welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, sometimes Mouse, and I talk about books and book related things, and today I am giving you my 2023 wrap up for the year. This is going to be a stats heavy video, so if that is not something you're into, you might want to skip ahead to when I talk about the things that I am interested in doing next year for my book reading as a whole. But if this is your kind of thing, if you enjoy stats, if you enjoy information about other people's reading, stick around. I've got quite a few of them. I have 2 disclaimers for this year, and one of them is a disclaimer that I have for every year. And the first disclaimer is don't compare yourself to me. Don't compare yourself to somebody who works a job wherein I can listen to audiobooks all day. Don't hold yourself to my accountability, to my reading style, to anything like that. As long as you're reading, it's a good thing, so it doesn't matter. If you were reading something, if you read 1 book this year, great. If you read 800 books this year, great. Having read almost 800 books 1 year, I don't recommend that behavior, but if that's what you're doing and it's helping you cope, which is what I was doing, great. For me, I read a lot of books. I know that I read a lot of books. I understand that for some people it is not believable, the amount of books that I read. And if that is your opinion, then I highly recommend that you go somewhere else. But yeah, so that's the first disclaimer. The second disclaimer is that I did not track my book purchases very well this year. If you have watched my channel for the last year, you know that I went through something really traumatic this year, and I don't know. Keeping track of that was too much work. I was just making sure my bills got paid, really, at the end of the day. So that's where I'm at on that. I want to do better about it this upcoming year, because in general I want to do better about budgeting this upcoming year, but I didn't buy a ton of books last year or this past year, and I'm not going to buy a ton of books next year because I will still be in the same financial situation I'm currently in, so we will see. But those are my big disclaimers for my wrap up. Let's go ahead and get into the stats. So I read a total of 285 books this year, which I think is around the same amount that I read last year. It's not, 365 books. It's not a book for every single day, but it's still a pretty high number. And I am neither displeased or pleased with that number. I genuinely don't care anymore what that number is. I just read. So that's how I feel about that. I DNF'd a total of 3 books, which is pretty low. I think that out of the over 1,500 books that I've read in the last 3 or 4 years, I DNF'd 18 total books. So I don't DNF a ton, but I am pleased to see that it was only 3 this year. As I read more, I am more and more aware of the kinds of books that I enjoy, and so I read fewer and fewer books that have a chance of causing me to DNF. I read a total of 55,916 pages, which is a big number, and that is all books that I had to read with my eyes, not just audiobooks. And for the audiobooks, I listened to a total of 53 days, 14 hours, and 45 minutes worth of audiobooks. That's almost 2 months worth of just straight listening to books, which that doesn't surprise me, considering how many audiobooks I listen to. So my average pages per day was 146.78, and my average listening hours per day was 6 hours, 13 minutes, and 1 second. It took me an average of 2.6 days to finish a book, and I read an average of 24 books a month, which that tracks for the book blanket. That's about how many books I needed to read to get a whole block done. So for the book blanket, that really makes a lot of sense. I had a total of 36 rereads this year, which is lower, I think, than last year. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's lower than last year because I quit doing my childhood reread series, and so I think that kind of changed that number quite a bit. But that was 13% of all of my reading. I read a total of 128 audiobooks, 94 physical books, which is genuinely surprising, and 63 ebooks. For those books, the page counts, for the ones that had pages, I read words for the page counts. I read a total of 14 books that were between 101 and 200 pages, 32 books between 201 and 300 pages, 59 books between 301 and 400 pages, 27 books between 401 and 500 pages, 10 books between 501 and 600 pages, 2 books between 601 and 700 pages, and 6 books that were over 700 pages. I am not a big book, like a chonky book reader, really, so honestly, this 6 over 700 pages, I think most of them are the Familiar series, like if I'm being honest, and there's 4 of those books, so that makes sense, and I think all of them are like 800 to 900 pages, so that makes sense, but it's a bit funny either way. For the intended audiences of those books, I have been consistently making it a goal to read more adult books. I think I can officially mark that off of my goals list because I think I'm now just doing it because it's genuinely what I enjoy more of, and I've discovered that it's more of what I enjoy. With that being said, I read 197 books with the intended audience for adults. I read 66 with young adult audience, and then 22 books were either children or middle grade books. I also would like to point out that the reason that I bring up the page counts and then the audiences is because when I have in the past talked about how many books I've read, I get a lot of the really common comments I get are, you count your DNFs. Well, I only DNF 3 this year, so even if I did, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. You only read children's books. I only read 22 of them. Or that you only read books that are below 200 pages. But my like standard range is 300 to 400 pages. That's my like general range. They're all over 200 pages though. Like my preferred page count is going to be over 200 pages. So I include these stats a lot of the times to dispute any of those comments. So if you did stick around because you wanted to make the statement that I only read for clout, which is still a very funny joke to me, those are your statistics to show otherwise. For genres, I am not surprised by these numbers at all. I read a total of 99 fantasy books, 73 horror books, 44 thriller books, 24 sci-fi, 16 romance, 10 general nonfiction, 6 contemporary, 5 general fiction, 3 classics, 3 memoirs, and 2 historical books. So I think the thing that surprises me the most was the nonfictions, because that kind of started to be more of a predominant thing in my reading towards the end of the year, and I think that I'm going to continue to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because it's part of my goals for the upcoming year. And we've still got more stats to go through though. For like style of book, I guess, 263 of the books that I read were prose, so that's 82% of my reads are just standard prose books. 4% of my reads were graphic novels, so that's 13 of my total reads. 2% were short story collections, which is 5 total books, and 1% were novellas, which was 4 total books. I don't generally even count my novellas when I'm counting reading, unless it's like a book I had to check out at the library, a book I can put on Goodreads, but like there's a lot of short story / novella books like in the October Day series, and I didn't really count a ton of those because I didn't want to. That's it. I just didn't want to. I felt like it would be too tedious to put all of it in, and so I just didn't. But I did read all of those, and it was like there's like 4 or 5 60-page short stories between each book, and I read all of those this year, so I don't know what that means. On to just general other stats, mostly my readings. So 59% of my reads this year, so 165 of them were 4-star reads. Each year I get progressively quote-unquote meaner or more honest with my reviews. I've used the call pile method, and I still really enjoy using the call pile method, and I have become much more honest with my reads. 20% of my books were 3-star reads, so that's 56. Total books, only 38 books were 5-star reads for me, which is 13%. 13 books were 2-star reads, making it 5%, and 3 books were 1-star making it 1%. There are some books, obviously that's not the total books, there are some books where it was like 1.5 or a half star or whatever, and I didn't want to include any of them because they're just straight up were not enough for me to like talk about those. It was 7 total books for that, and so you're not missing out on anything. 61% of my books were from the library this year, and 77 of them I just read for fun. So my options were like a review copy, a readathon, which I only participate in one readathon and it's mine. That sounds terrible, but I don't really enjoy readathons, ironically. Or review copies, readathons, I think book club, which I'm going to be removing this year, or this upcoming year. And there's something else, but I don't even know. Fun and personal development. But 77% of them were just for fun. They weren't even review copies or anything, because I've had my reviews closed for about a year now, and this is just what I enjoy. Oh, sorry, one more stat. My month where I read the most books, oddly enough, was the month that I took a really long road trip and didn't expect to read anything on, but also not that odd because it seems like it's consistently my birthday month is the month where I read the most books. So May, I read 30 books, and then the month where I read the least amount of books was January, which also I think seems to be a pretty statistical standard. Like I think that I get kind of burnt out towards the end of the year because of CLEARURSHT probably. I read 20 total books in January, and that is the least amount of the year. On to like my goals and things that I want to do next year and things I want to track better next year. So for next year, some of the things I want to do is I want to read 1 nonfiction book a month. I think that personal development is really important, and I also think that it is really important to broaden my literary horizons. I know that I am not a classic book reader, and as much as I would love to be a classic book reader or get something from reading those books, they make me want to yeet myself into a flaming pit. So I know that that's not going to be how I get any kind of personal development in or any kind of learning or growing. So I am going to try and read 1 nonfiction book a month. I will say that I might also give myself some wiggle room if I decide to read like a book of collection of writings from say Sylvia Plath or Virginia Woolf or that kind of thing. Any kind of like classical or neoclassical author, if I decide to read a collection of their poems or something, I think that I will count that towards that goal, even though it's not nonfiction. I also think that it would be cool in my book blanket to have that like visual of when I read nonfiction. I think that it'll come out kind of cool. If you watch that video that's coming out next week where I talk about the colors of the month, you'll see why I think that nonfiction once a month will be a cool add-in into my reads. I want to switch out the book club part of my 2023 stats. Like I basically am just pulling that Google Sheets over into a new doc. I want to switch the book club stat to YouTube because I would be interested to see what books I've read specifically for content. I don't do a ton of content specific reads, but I have been doing those 24-hour reads, and I'd be curious about by the end of the year like what percentage that makes up. I also would be curious about seeing that in contrast to my ratings, like how many of those books tank my ratings for the month and that kind of thing. I think it would be interesting to see those numbers, so I'm going to switch the book club thing out because I'm not in a book club and I don't want to be in a book club. I also want to do better, and I talked about this in the beginning of the video, I want to do better about tracking the books that I've purchased. Just in general, I just kind of fell off on it because the year was really hard for me. So I spent under $150 on books for myself. Most of my book buying budget goes to my husband now. When he's home, obviously that's going to change. He'll buy his own books, I'm sure. But that's that plan. I also am going to be using a book journal specifically for more organized thoughts. I watched Monica's, well, it wasn't Monica's video about Monica's book journal, but I watched someone's video. I will try and either include it in the edit or include it in down below. At the very least, the link to the video going through Monica's book journal because it's beautiful. And while my book journal is not going to look like that at all, it is just a little Hobonichi, like a A6 Hobonichi. She's very small. My plan is to at the very least, when I saw that video, I saw that she prints out the books that she's reading and pastes the photos of them and writes down a review. And I think that that could be really effective for me, because I can, as soon as I finish a book, I can write it down, rate it, write my immediate thoughts on it, and I know for myself that when I write something down, it has allowed my brain to process that information a little bit better, and so it retains better. I also might use it to do things like character tracking, that kind of thing, because of the tendency to forget even main character names because of how bad my memory is. I've talked about that a lot, I joke about it a lot, but I genuinely have memory issues because of the undiagnosed ADHD that went untreated for such a long time, and then from PTSD. Like I have genuinely very, very bad memory, and so this will help me be a little bit more organized. It also is going to be good, a good place for me to track, like if I see a book recommendation in something, I can just write it down in the back, because there's, you know, there's like pages that are in not English that explain a bunch of things, and I don't know what they explain, but there's the My 100 list, and so I can write, you know, book recommendations there, whatever, and I think that that'll also be a really good way to keep track of that. So I think that that is going to be also like fun. I also think it's going to be fun. We'll see if I keep up with it, but those are kind of the goals for the year. You know, I want to do all of those things. I also would like to read a few more books in Spanish. I, as a personal goal, am going to be studying Spanish a little bit more thoroughly. I kind of took a step back from studying Spanish because I was focusing on learning the piano, and now I have done that for almost a year, so I would like to focus more on learning Spanish. And so I would like to read, I would like to get up to reading Spanish chapter books. Not necessarily like young adult or adult, but at the very least like middle grade Spanish chapter books. That's kind of my goal with language learning and reading, is like I would like to get there, but we'll see. I might even track what language the books are in, although I don't think I will be reading enough books in Spanish to be worth tracking that, but maybe. Storygraph tracks it for me, so yeah. That's another thing. I might fully transition over to Storygraph and leave Goodreads. I haven't decided for sure, but I kind of hate Goodreads, and now that Storygraph has an app and is working pretty functionally, and it has a reading streak function, which I love having a reading streak, like the thrills I get from a reading streak. So I haven't fully decided on that yet, but I might be transitioning over from Goodreads to Storygraph completely. I've moved over in the last couple of months and I'm using both concurrently, but I might, now that Goodreads has broken so much of its API and cross-posting functions, I don't really know why I'm using it anymore. But that is my 2023 wrap-up, as well as my goals for 2024. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Sorry it was so long and rambly. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If you're excited to follow along with the things that I'm doing next year, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear about it. If you didn't enjoy this video, I'm sorry. I only make them once a year though. And yeah, that's it. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. Okay, thanks, bye.